Thanks for being here and allowing me to share Lesson Notice. I'm Didi Morris. Please like, share, and subscribe. Browse the description box below. Leave your insightful comments. And let's delve in to this topic today, which is signs that you are the victim of narcissistic abuse. Firstly, let's imagine this. Your entire reality has been warped and distorted. You have been mercilessly violated, manipulated, lied to, ridiculed, demeaned, and gaslighted into believing that you are imagining things. The person you thought you knew perhaps all your life, and the life that you were building with someone has been shattered into a million little pieces. Your sense of self has been eroded, it's been diminished. You were idealized, you were devalued, and then you were shoved off the pedestal, so to speak. Perhaps you were even replaced and discarded many times over, only to be quote-unquote hoovered and lured back into an abusive cycle, even more torturous than before. Maybe you were relentlessly stalked, harassed, and bullied to stay with the abuser. By the way, this was not a normal breakup or relationship. This was a setup for covert and insidious murder of your psyche and your sense of safety in the world. There may not be any visible scars to tell the tale, and all you may have are broken pieces, fractured memories, and the internal battle wounds. Basically, this is what narcissistic abuse looks like. Psychological violence by malignant narcissists can include verbal, emotional abuse, toxic projection, stonewalling, sabotage, smear campaigns, silent treatments, triangulation, along with a plethora of forms of coercion and control. This is imposed by someone who lacks empathy, someone who demonstrates an excessive sense of entitlement, and that person engages in interpersonal exploitation just to meet their own needs at the expense and the rights of everyone else. This is why chronic abuse victims of narcissists may struggle with symptoms of PTSD, complex PTSD, if they had additional traumas like being abused by a narcissistic parent, or even what is known as narcissistic victim syndrome. The aftermath of narcissistic abuse can include depression, anxiety, hypervigilance, a pervasive sense of toxic shame, emotional flashbacks that regress the victim back to the abusive incidences, and an overwhelming feeling of helplessness and worthlessness. When in the midst of an ongoing abusive cycle, it can be difficult to pinpoint exactly what we're experiencing because the abuser are able to twist and turn reality to suit their own needs. They engage in intense love bombing after abusive incidences and convince their victim that they are the ones who are the abusers. If you find yourself experiencing any of these symptoms I'm about to address, and you are or have been in a toxic relationship with a partner that disrespects you, invalidates you, and mistreats you, you may have been terrorized by an emotional predator. Number 1, you walk on eggshells. A common symptom of trauma is avoiding anything that represents reliving the trauma, whether it be people, places, or activities that pose that threat. It may be your friend, your partner, family member, a parent, a coworker, a boss. You find yourself constantly watching what you say, what you do around this person. You may incur their wrath, their rage, or their punishment. Or you may become the object of their envy. However, you find that this just doesn't work, and you still become the abuser's target whenever he or she feels entitled to use you as an emotional punching bag. You become perpetually anxious about provoking your abuser in any way, and you may avoid confrontation or setting boundaries as a result. You may also extend your people-pleasing behavior outside of the abusive relationship. You end up losing your ability to be spontaneous and assertive while navigating the outside or external world. especially with people who resemble or are associated with your abuser and the abuse you experience. Number 2, you put aside your basic needs, your desires. You sacrifice your emotional and even your physical safety just to please the abuser. You may have once been full of life, goal-driven, goal-oriented. Now you feel as if you're living just to fulfill the needs and the agendas of another person. Once, the narcissist's entire life seemed to revolve around you. Now your whole life seemed to revolve around the narcissist. You may have placed your goals, your hobbies, your friendships, your personal safety on the back burner just to ensure that your abuser feels satisfied in the relationship. But you soon realize that he or she will never truly be satisfied no matter what you do or what you don't do. Number 3, you are struggling with health issues and somatic symptoms that represent your psychological turmoil. So you may have gained or lost a lot of weight, or you may have developed serious health issues that didn't exist prior, and you experience physical symptoms of premature aging. The stress of chronic abuse has sent your cholesterol levels into overdrive, and your immune system has taken a severe hit, leaving you vulnerable to physical ailments and disease. You find yourself unable to sleep or experiencing terrifying nightmares when you do sleep. This happens because you're reliving the trauma through emotional and visual flashbacks that bring you back to the site of the original wounds. Number 4, you develop a pervasive sense of mistrust. So every person now represents a threat, and you find yourself becoming anxious about the intentions of others, especially having experienced the malicious actions of someone you once trusted. Your usual caution becomes hypervigilance. Since the narcissistic abuser has worked hard to gaslight you into believing that your experiences are invalid, you have a hard time trusting anyone, even yourself. Number 5, you experience suicidal ideation or self-harming tendencies. Along with depression and anxiety, there may come an increased sense of hopelessness. Your circumstances feel unbearable and that you can't escape, even if you wanted to. You develop a sense of learned helplessness that make you feel as if you don't wish to survive another day. A doctor by the name of Dr. McKeown states that victims of intimate partner violence are twice as likely to attempt suicide many times. This is the way the abuser essentially commits murder without a trace. Please browse my description box below for suicidal prevention information. Number 6, you self-isolate. Many abusers isolate their victims, but victims also isolate themselves because they feel ashamed about the abuse they're experiencing. Given the victim blaming and misconceptions about emotional and psychological violence in our society, victims may even be re-traumatized by law enforcement, family members, friends, other authorities, and the harem members or the enablers, quote-unquote, flying monkeys of the narcissist, who might invalidate their perceptions of what really happened, the abuse. They fear that no one will understand or even believe them, so instead of reaching out for help, they decide to withdraw from others as a way to avoid judgment and retaliation from their abuser. Number 7, you compare yourself to others, even to the extent of blaming yourself for their abuse. A narcissistic abuser is highly skilled at manufacturing love triangles or bringing another person into the dynamic of the relationship to further terrorize the victim. This is commonly known as triangulation. This can be done with romantic situations, family situations, friend situations, or even work situations. As a result, victims of narcissistic abuse internalize the fear that they're just not good enough, or they may constantly strive to compete for the abuser's attention and approval. Victims may also compare themselves to others in seemingly happier and healthier relationships, or find themselves wondering why their abuser appears to treat complete strangers with more respect. This can send a victim down a trapdoor of wondering, why me? Feeling stuck in an abyss of self-blame. The truth is that the abuser is the person who should be blamed. You are in no way responsible for being abused. It is abuse. Number 8, you self-sabotage and you self-destruct. Targets often find themselves ruminating over the abuse and hearing the abuser's voice in their heads, amplifying their negative self-talk and tendency towards self-sabotage. Malignant narcissists, quote-unquote, program and condition their victims to self-destruct. Sometimes this is even to the point of driving them to suicide, as mentioned previously. Because of the narcissist's direct and indirect put-downs, their verbal abuse, and their hypercriticism, often targets develop a tendency to punish themselves because they carry this toxic shame. They may sabotage their goals, their dreams, their academic pursuits. The abuser has instilled in them a sense of worthlessness, and they begin to believe that they are undeserving of good things. Number 9, you fear doing what you love and achieving success. Since many pathological predators are envious of their targets, they punish them for succeeding. This conditions their victims to associate their joys, their interests, their talents, and areas of success with cruel and callous treatment. This conditioning gets their targets to fear success, or else they'll be met with punishment and reprimand. As a result, targets become depressed, anxious, they begin to lack confidence, and they may hide from the spotlight just to allow the abuser to steal the show again and again. Please realize that your abuser is not undercutting your gifts because they truly believe you are inferior. It's because those gifts threaten your abuser's control over you. Number 10, you protect your abuser and you even gaslight yourself. Rationalizing, minimizing, and denying the abuse are often survival mechanisms for the target in an abusive relationship. So in order to reduce the cognitive dissonance that happens or erupts when a person who claims to love you mistreats you, targets of abuse convince themselves that the abuser is really not all that bad, or that they must have done something to cause the abuse or provoke the abuse. It is very important to reduce this cognitive dissonance in the other direction. This is how you do it. You read up on narcissistic personality disorder and the abuse tactics. In this way, you're able to reconcile your current reality with the narcissist's false self by recognizing that the abusive personality, not the charming facade, is who you're really dealing with. Remember that an intense trauma bond is often formed between a target and the abuser because the target is trained to rely on the abuser for their survival. Targets may even protect their abuser from legal consequences. They may portray a happy image of the relationship on social media, or they overcompensate by quote-unquote sharing the blame of the abuse. Finally, number 11, you experience disassociation as a survival mechanism. You feel emotionally and even physically detached from your environment. You experience disruptions in your memory, your perceptions, your consciousness, and your sense of self. As Dr. Van der Kolk wrote in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, this dissociation is the essence of trauma. The overwhelming experience is split off and fragmented so that the emotions, the sounds, the images, the thoughts, and the physical sensations take on a life of their own. This association can lead to emotional numbing in the face of horrific circumstances, mind-numbing activities, obsessions, addictions, and repression may become a way of life because they give you an escape from your current reality. Your brain innately finds ways to emotionally block out the impact of your pain so you don't have to deal with the full terror of your circumstances. You may also develop traumatized inner parts that become disjointed from the personality you inhabit with your abuser or your loved ones. These inner parts can include your inner child parts that were never nurtured, the true anger and disgust you felt towards your abuser, or parts of yourself you feel you cannot express around the abuser. There's a therapist, her name is Sherry Heller, with who she states that integrating and reclaiming disassociated and disowned aspects or parts of the personality. She stated that integrating and reclaiming disassociated and disowned aspects of your personality is largely dependent on constructing a cohesive narrative which allows the assimilation of emotional, cognitive, and psychological realities. Thus, this inner integration is best done with the help of a trauma-informed therapist. If you are currently in an abusive relationship of any kind, know that you're not alone, even if you feel like you're alone. There are millions of survivors all over the globe who have experienced what you've experienced. This form of psychological trauma is not exclusive to any gender, culture, class, race, or religion. The first step is becoming aware of the reality of your situation and validating it. Even if your abuser attempts to gaslight you into believing otherwise. It's a good idea, if you can, to journal about the experiences you've been going through and to begin acknowledging the realities of the abuse. Share your truth with a trusted mental health professional, domestic violence advocates, family members, mentors, coaches, friends, or fellow survivors. You can begin to heal your body through modalities like trauma-focused yoga and mindfulness meditation, two practices which target the same parts of the brain often affected by trauma. These are two practices that target the same parts of the brain which are often affected by trauma. According to Dr. Vanderkolk, it is not easy to leave an abusive relationship because of the intense trauma bonds that can develop and the effects of trauma, the pervasive sense of helplessness and hopelessness that can form as a result of the abuse. You have to know that it is in fact possible to leave, and you can begin the journey to no contact or low contact in the cases of co-parenting and employment situations, etc. Recovery from this form of abuse is challenging, but it is well worth paving the path back to freedom and putting the pieces back together.